Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to have Minister McClay with us. Minister, I know you've spent a huge amount of time in Europe, you've spent a huge amount of time in the Pacific. I don't have a sense of you in America. Have you spent a lot of time there? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Simon, thanks so much. And I've got to say, Fran's told you and I to be very well behaved here. For those that
she literally just did.
She
That's
actually
true.
just told us to be very well behaved. And I need to start by thanking you for your great generosity. Last time I was here a year ago, Simon arranged a birthday cake to come along for me, and you're very, very grateful. And he's told me if I answer all the questions properly, he's still got some of the cake from last year I can have. I have been to the US quite a lot. As with most people, it's a fascination. If you grew up in New Zealand, you watch TV, you know, a lot of what we learnt, a lot of what we saw came from the US. So when I was 21 years of age, along with, you know, thousands of other Kiwis who do their OE, I went to the States and was there for 6 months. I left the day before my visa had run out and travelled around and enjoyed it a lot. I've subsequently been back a lot, a little bit for work before I came to Parliament, and then privately for vacations and holidays and so on. But as an MP, as a minister, I've been 3 or 4 times formally to Washington twice. I went up in the Trump 1 presidency and had a range of meetings. At the time, we got confirmation that as the then first Trump presidency had worked through you know, some of the challenges they had with countries where there were great trade disparity, they were interested in doing a trade deal with New Zealand. And now, of course, as you've heard earlier with my counterpart Jamison Greer, who I've become quite friendly with, have had a lot of meetings, a lot of contact, and was up in Washington earlier. So as for many New Zealanders, I find America fascinating. I like it a lot. I like to visit. It's amazing how well it works, except they drive on the wrong side of the road.
Well, let's talk about Jamison Greer. I mean, it seems to me what's absolutely true about you is you're incredibly good relationally. I mean, we've seen it with recent month or two. Piyush Goyal, your counterpart in India, you got alongside him. You've struck up a great rapport, and that's, you know, we have a sense going to pay dividends in terms of an India-New Zealand free trade agreement. Tell us about Jamison Greer. How many times have you met him? How's that relationship?
Yeah, look, 4 or 5 is the answer. I'm not sure. I haven't counted the one in Washington when he invited us up soon after the US had announced that the tariff rate for New Zealand was going up to 15%. He invited me up to go and, you know, talk about that and the uncertainty it was creating for business in both directions between New Zealand and the US. I've had a chance to meet him in many places around the world, and we've sort of talked on the phone and messaged and so on. And I think there's a genuine like between us. We have the same job to do, which is to stand up for the business community and exporters in our own countries. But the very interesting thing, my observation of being Trade Minister this time compared to under the key English government is that, one, it is harder in the world for New Zealand than it used to be. The world is a tougher place to do business. There is a range of reasons for those. None of them are important. It just is harder to do business. But secondly, from the point of view of governments and trade ministers, we are finding ways to work together, even when we don't always agree with each other, because actually that is our job, to create certainty. Our position over tariffs is clear. The Prime Minister has been very clear about that today. But that doesn't mean that it's a falling out. It is a very strong relationship we have with the US, and New Zealand has an and strategy. We want New Zealand exporters to continue to be able to do business in the US and in China and in Europe, and it's an and. So our job is to find ways to level the playing field. So Jamison and I have, talked a lot about this. We've also, broadened the conversation away from just New Zealand and US trade. We are talking about the things around the world that US business and New Zealand business, along with Australia and many other countries, find difficult. What are the things that perhaps we can work together on internationally? The e-commerce moratorium that we were able, New Zealand, to roll over at the WTO meeting a year ago, just for 2 years. Other ways we can work together because our business communities want us to on that, and the answer from both sides has been yes, let's gently explore those sorts of things.
We'll talk settings in a second and trade policy, but in terms of yourself and Trade Representative Greer, I mean, is it a robust relationship? Is there room for a lot of common ground? How would you describe that?
Well, I first met Jamison when he worked for Bob Lighthizer, the USTR under President Trump in the first term, and in our first meeting we sort of remembered each other based not upon my intellectual ability to talk about trade, more the gift that I brought Bob from New Zealand. He had told me that he was a great fly fisherman on his first meeting, so when we went to Washington I found a fishing box that I bought in a shop on the road from Rotorua that came from his state, and I loaded it up with New Zealand fishing flies and gave it to him, and I said, this is trade. And he said, I think that fishing box is now made in China. And I said to him, well, that really is trade. That's how it works. Anyway, the reason the story carries on is, of course, we had an election and I was no longer trade minister and David Parker was. And every time David Parker, as New Zealand Trade Minister, met Bob Lighthizer anywhere around the world and Jamison Greer was there, he would say, there's that New Zealander, thank you for that fly box. And it used to annoy the living hell out of David Parker, apparently. Anyway, the point of this is we had the opportunity to remember that, and Jamison is a very, very robust representative of the US on trade. He executes the president's agenda extremely professionally and very, very well, but there is enough space for common ground for one to have mutual respect of each other and to work its way together on what is good for US consumers and New Zealand exporters.
Have you given Jamison Greer a gift, or?
I have not.
Let's sort of delve into it. I think we all in this room understand the basic story around trade and tariffs, what's happened. I'm just interested to get your, I suppose, high-level description and assessment of the current situation with the US, the good, the bad, the ugly. Where's it at?
Well, I think for New Zealanders, it was Nathan from Zespri who mentioned it, and I've been talking about this a lot. Look, tariff rates in themselves are harmful. We disagree with them. We think the trade is very well balanced. You heard the Prime Minister say, on average, US imports into New Zealand face a 0.3% tariff rate. It's very, very low. We are an open economy. There are few restrictions. We don't create artificial barriers to trade because we're championing them being taken down around the world. But the US has this new trade agenda. The President campaigned on it. What is more harmful for most New Zealand businesses than the tariff rate is the uncertainty it creates as the rate has changed. And by the way, this isn't unique to New Zealand. This will be every single company or exporter around the world that deals with the US. I suspect that uncertainty as a result of the very fast nature that the change in sort of tariff regime and trade policy has been implemented in the US is making it hard for US businesses too, because how do you plan ahead what might the prices be over the next year or over the next 2 years? New Zealand exporters, though, are very, very nimble. They have adjusted very well. There are some smaller ones particularly that has been very, very harmful to their business. There are many others that have adjusted. You've heard from the Prime Minister, our trade is not being significantly affected, even with a higher tariff rate. The drop for beef and kiwi fruit and some other things back down to MFN, which in many cases is zero tariff rate, a very small one, of course is welcome. But ultimately what New Zealand businesses are doing is judging for themselves where they want to put their effort and where they might get the best return for that effort around the world. And so the government is working with them and backing them. The one thing I would say, though, is when there is uncertainty around the world, one or two things can happen in trade. The first is countries can use that to put up barriers to protect. We've seen that a little bit. We're not seeing it as much as perhaps we did last time or some would expect. The second thing that happens is countries can come together to try to create certainty for their businesses and try and do deals, and many, many more of them. And we're starting to see that this is a direct result of President Trump's trade policy, that there are more trade deals being negotiated in the world at the moment than I can think of at any time before that I've been able to think about trade.
We wouldn't have necessarily, we didn't expect that, did we?
No, we didn't, although it happened to some degree under the first Trump presidency, but no, the answer is that we wouldn't. What it's done is as America's gone out to say we're going to negotiate with almost all countries of the world, they too are saying, well, we should negotiate with each other. And that in itself eventually is very, very good for trade, because a rules-based approach, rules that business can rely upon that give them certainty, allows a business to make decisions around investment, quantify risk, and make good decisions for themselves. So ultimately, people will strongly disagree with us. Jump forward 5 or 10 years, the world is likely to almost be a more certain place because we are having more trade agreements on the condition that when trade agreements are done, countries respect the rules within those agreements. The final thing, the very big challenge we have is the WTO ministerial meeting is next year in Cameroon. The WTO is very important for New Zealand. It's one of the most important bodies that there is when it comes to trade, because as a small export nation, if we don't get to go there to make our case and talk to like-minded, we don't get to do it. But I would argue it's important for every single country of the world. It is not a perfect organisation. It doesn't always work well, but its fault is that of the members, because we are the ones that make the decisions, not our ambassadors in Geneva or elsewhere. And so it is upon all of us to look at how we can fix the WTO so it functions, so it works, so it is good for business, so it is good for consumers and citizens around the world. And I know every country, including the US, has said that they will play their part, albeit we need to cut through and make decisions, not just keep talking.
We're here primarily to talk about the US. Just to pick up on what you've said and cover it off. What you're telling me, we're talking more bilateral deals, multilateral, plurilateral. What are we talking here? And just on the WTO, some positive signs, because the US is now paid its way, and there's some of that. But is it time to give up on that, or is it? What's our specific agenda there?
No, it's not time to give up on it, and I think for the very countries that often say that the WTO should finish are the ones that are responsible for the harm that's being done. So no, it shouldn't at all. It has achieved more in trade and rules than any bilateral deal ever has done. It is significant, it is important, and New Zealand will always keep fighting for it, as many other nations do. To answer your question, there are many bilateral negotiations underway. You've seen us with India, and we're making good and steady progress. It is a tough, hard negotiation, and it will be right until the end, until it's concluded. And it will be done during this term of Parliament. That's my firm belief. But there are multilaterals and others as well. You think about the CPTPP, which almost needs another name because that's too long and hard to pronounce. And it also is not really trans-Pacific anymore, because the UK has come in. In the ministerial meeting we had in Melbourne just a couple of weeks ago, we agreed that Costa Rica was close to finishing the recession, and we're aiming to get them in by the end of the year. They have a little bit more to do to reach the very high standard of that agreement, because we've said we won't lower the standard. We agreed 4 other countries over the next 12 months we can start the accession process, negotiation: Uruguay, UAE, Philippines and Indonesia, small and large economies. And so ultimately, there are a range of negotiations going on, from small bilaterals to the FIT partnership, which is countries that have come together to look on, to agree rules around trade that are not a large FTA, to the CPTPP, to many other sorts of things. And so, as a trade minister, I'm very, very optimistic. Where my pessimism comes is the hard work, just how much is going on, and how we can ensure that the deals that are done are high quality and they're respected.
Absolutely. I think you said earlier, not that it doesn't matter, but the actual tariff level doesn't matter as much as the certainty, uncertainty. I mean, we're at 15%, although, of course, meat and dairy have come off. I think I heard you say in the media, that's about a quarter of our kind of tariffs. Is that right? So the effective rate is, considerably lower now?
Yeah, that's right. So it's almost 30% of our exports have just come down to MFN, in some cases zero. There's a saving of about $300 million of tariffs, I suppose. There is a lot of evidence, though, particularly for beef, that extra tariff rate was being passed on to the importers and therefore flowing through to US consumers. I'll clarify, I didn't mean to overstate that tariff rates are not harmful. Of course, they are they're harmful to New Zealand exporters. They make it harder for them to be competitive in market, particularly when others have a different tariff rate to compete. And in a given point of time, someone has to pay. It's either the exporter, in which case they can't send in, or it's the importer and the consumer. But I guess what I'm saying is, in business, a no is as good as a yes if it comes quickly, so you can make a decision and move on. One of the reasons that you're seeing this government working so quickly to replace, not reform, but replace the RMA, is if you want to go out of New Zealand to decide to put an investment somewhere to grow a part of the economy that's important, to create lots and lots of jobs in a region, you don't have certainty from years and years and years until the RMA decision is made. And so there are too many businesses in New Zealand or investors from overseas saying, I love that country, I'd love to be there, but I don't know whether I'll get that yes or what the cost will be and how long it will take. And so it is the same in trade. Changing nature of rights and obligations makes it very hard to understand cost and risk. And businesses who are uncertain are having to look elsewhere. Yet the US remains a very important market to us. We know what we produce and what we import from the US is complementary. That's the reason why the trade flows generally have been very balanced. A trade surplus we have of a modest $300 million. We're buying a few helicopters soon, which is business as usual. We were likely to do that anyway. Air New Zealand has just put in orders for 8 new aeroplanes. Business as usual. They were doing that anyway. They are coming very, very soon. It will be quite soon that the US has a significant trade surplus against us, but I won't be putting tariffs against them.
Well, I was just going to ask you that, though. I mean, do we need to buy planes? Do we need to be in the defence thing? Do you think that meaningfully creates the preconditions where you could get the rate down? Well, is that unrealistic?
So I think the government will always make decisions about what it spends or what it purchases that are in the best interests of New Zealand. We have to keep doing that. But as I mentioned, these decisions are actually business as usual. There's been underinvestment in the New Zealand Defence Force for a significant period of time. We've made the very difficult decision to change that because we have a role to play in our region and around the world. And we then go and look at where we procure from. It'll be a range of countries. And of course, it's going to be the US. There's no question about that. Air New Zealand made the decisions for themselves of the type of airplanes they want. Government not involved in that. And they are getting Boeings. And so this is business as usual, and we'll keep doing that. But there will be, the next few years, it will swing in roundabouts, the surplus and deficit, as it always has. That's why the relationship is balanced. What I did say to Jamison Greer is the reason that we've gone from 10% to 15% tariff is because of this very modest surplus. What is the procedure? What is the process for it to come down if it goes in the other direction? And he said he's working on that, and there will be a process. It's not known at this stage. But President Trump said he was going to put tariffs in place. I don't think anybody in this room around the country should expect that we are going back to what it used to be. That's not happening. But what we are doing is talking about how we create that certainty, we can stop the changes, and how we can find a way to continue to have a trade relationship with the US that is mutually beneficial for both sides, and how the rules can be very clear. And in that, Jamison, he said he's very open to the conversation.
Fantastic. Let's finish with something I think explicitly and absolutely rightly positive. It's not all this stuff. We heard on the last panel, it's absolutely right. I mean, two-way trade's over $30 billion. It's our second largest trading partner. If you'd asked me a decade ago, I would have said we'd never see that past Australia. Your Agri Minister, and you might want to talk about that. The reality is, though, we also heard on that last panel about the very exciting things going on in, services where we don't have the tariffs, tourism, tech, space, more. Talk to me about what you're seeing. Give us a sense of all of that.
Well, there's no question that the US economy are great consumers. They look for high-quality products around the world. They want choices, and they continue to want that. So we are seeing trade flows in both directions, not only remain stable in some areas, go up. The real win, and the high-quality food that we produce, consumers around the world want. There are many choices. Of course, Americans want them just as much as somebody in the UK. But I think the real opportunity, the real success of the last, 5 or 6 or 7 years and going forward is in that services space, and it's about tech, and it's about cooperation, and it's about two-way investment. Rocket Lab is a wonderful story. Mr. Rocket we're talking to is another, but there are so many startups in New Zealand that actually are putting effort into solving the challenges society has, from health to environment, to communication, to transportation, here in Auckland and around New Zealand. And it's only happening because we have a very open regime for investment, and US investors have found that, and they've found this is not only a great place to incubate ideas, but to grow them to go around the world. And this huge amount that New Zealanders can be proud of in that, but actually the US should be as well. This is a symbiotic relationship that works very, very well when we can set the rules clearly and then move back a little bit to give space. The business communities between the US and New Zealand together do quite amazing things. You know, a young man from New Zealand, Invercargill, that liked rockets, not doing his homework, and now we put more rockets into space than almost everybody in the world except for two very, very large countries, much bigger than us, would not have happened without that long-term relationship New Zealand has with the US, and that's a bit we have to work hard on, and that's a bit we have to protect in the coming years.
Fantastic stuff. As Nathan Flowerday said, actually, speaking of which, what great last names on the last panel. Flowerday, Rocket, a guy running an aerospace school. Smith, not so much, but that's okay. But as Nathan said, Trade McClay, great presentation, really good to talk with you as always. I'm sorry, there is no birthday cake, we only do these on birthdays. Ladies and gentlemen, Todd McClay.
Thank you so much.